In the developed world, life can be quite comfortable. For most of us, there's plenty to eat, more than adequate housing, efficient transport, and consumer goods of all kinds to buy. In fact, we seem to have an unquenchable appetite for the latest fashions, the newest features, and attractive packaging. But it also means that we're constantly disposing of all that packaging, the goods we no longer want, and the ever-increasing volume of waste. Where does all the rubbish go? Well, the common solution is to bury it. Use all that waste to fill up holes in the ground, such as old quarries or places where a higher land level is required. In other words, the local tip. Another kind of waste, less related to our lifestyle and more to the design of our cities and towns, is sewage, the natural waste from our bodies and the dirty water from houses and industry. With either form of waste disposal, natural decomposition results in gases that present additional problems because of smell, explosion risk and damage to the natural environment. But it's one of the main components of these gases, methane, that presents an opportunity to solve some of these problems and also makes it possible to collect an important source of energy from waste. The rotting of any kind of animal or vegetable waste is a process that all of us are familiar with, and it's usually our noses that tell us when it's happening. The process involves the conversion of organic matter by microorganisms into a mixture of gases which are mainly carbon dioxide and methane. These microorganisms are anaerobes, which means that they operate in the absence of oxygen. They're thought to be a very early form of bacteria that evolved before the Earth had an oxygen-rich atmosphere. The methane that they produce is the simplest hydrocarbon, with 4 hydrogen atoms attached to 1 carbon atom. It's quite flammable. In fact, natural gas that you might be using at home is primarily methane. Methane has also been identified as an important factor in the predicted warming of the Earth's atmosphere, the greenhouse effect. Its efficiency in trapping radiated heat is considered to be 21 times that of carbon dioxide. These two factors make the collection and harnessing of methane generated from various sources very important. First, let's look at the situation with sewage. In Melbourne, sewage waste from 40% of the city is piped to the southeastern purification plant at Carrum, 34 kilometres from the city centre. Here, the liquid waste is first screened to remove any large solids which could damage the pumping system. Next, the sludge is allowed to settle, then transferred to large heated containers known as digesters. Here, methane gas is produced naturally from the waste when microbiological organisms break down the organic matter in 2 stages. First, there's a simple fermentation process, with acid-forming bacteria converting the complex organic compounds into acetic acid and carbon dioxide. Then, the methane-forming bacteria convert the acid into methane and carbon dioxide. To optimise the rate of gas production from the digesters, the temperature of the sludge needs to be accurately maintained between 36 and 37 degrees Celsius. To keep the process going, fresh sludge is added to the digesters as the converted sludge is withdrawn. The digested sludge is pumped to drying pans, and after a storage period to make sure that disease-causing organisms are dead, it can be used as garden fertiliser. In Victoria, interest in collecting and using the so-called sludge gas developed when it was realised that the purification plant could use the gas to supply its own energy needs.
The plant was designed in the 60s, it was built in the 70s, and it was commissioned back in 1975. And I suppose back in the 70s there was an energy crisis, and it was deemed that the sludge gas could be utilised to run our, or to generate power to run our power station. So we've been generating power ever since 1975 by utilising sludge gas.
The gas, which is a mixture of methane, carbon dioxide and nitrogen, is compressed and pumped from the 6 digesters to the power station, where it's used to fuel 4 generating units. The power station is capable of producing 4.8 megawatts of electricity per hour. That's about enough power to supply around 5,000 houses. The engines driving the alternators are in fact converting the chemical energy in the gas to heat in the engine cylinders. But only a third of this heat energy is actually being converted into electricity. The remaining heat energy is transferred into the water used to cool the engines, or escapes from the engine's exhaust system. Harnessing of this energy, which would otherwise be lost, is called cogeneration.
It's like, I suppose, like a car engine. There's obviously having a big, large internal combustion engine. There's a fair amount of heat generated from the cooling water, which is required to keep the engine cool. That heat goes into what we call a heat reservoir system, or just a big, large heat system, and that hot water is distributed around the plant and is used, one, to heat the digesters via heat exchangers, and secondly, to use it heating for the air conditioning in all the buildings.
Another factor which controls the way that energy from the digesters is used is the cost of electricity supplied from the state power grid.
They can't just shut their power stations down in the evening. So what they've done to encourage industry to use power, they've lowered their price during what they call the off-peak, which is 11 o'clock at night through till 7 o'clock in the morning, and all weekends is off-peak. Now, in comparison, off-peak power is $14 per megawatt, as compared to $82.30 a megawatt during the daytime, and we can generate it ourselves for $33 a megawatt without maintenance costs. So you can see that during the peak period it's cheaper for us to generate at $33 per megawatt, and during the off-peak buy it at $14 approximately a megawatt from SEC. The power station comes 11 o'clock at night. The power station is closed down, and the sludge gas then is redirected to our outfall pumping station, where that's the area where the effluent from the plant is pumped to the ocean, and we utilise the sludge gas in that area at night time rather than utilising natural gas. So the sludge gas can go one of 2 ways, one to the power station or to the outfall pumping station.
A different approach to the collection of the methane-rich sludge gas is happening at another Melbourne water treatment plant at Werribee. Here, in the pilot for what could prove to be the largest project to collect methane from sewage, the gas formed in the treatment ponds is trapped under giant plastic sheets.
Where I'm standing at the moment is on top of the anaerobic reactor of a lagoon system. Now, a lagoon is a series of ponds, and this is the first pond, and the anaerobic reactor is the first part of the first pond. And some of these ponds are about 1.5 kilometres long, so it gives you an idea of the scale. In this area here, the raw wastewater comes in, and because oxygen is excluded, the anaerobic organisms start digesting up all the organic material. And as a byproduct of that, they produce a lot of odorous gases, and they also produce carbon dioxide and methane. So this cover aims to trap all of those gases that have been given off, which might be offensive to the community. The cover then does a number of things. As well as trapping the gases, it traps the heat that the bugs naturally give off as they go through the digestion process. And that heat then is trapped underneath. If they're kept warmer, particularly during winter, then they'll be able to do the job better, and so then be able to treat more wastewater for us. The gases, when they're taken off, consist of the flammable methane, and so when we burn that, we naturally destroy the odorous gases as well. But if you've got something that you can burn, then you've got an energy source. And what we hope to do is to generate electricity to power the aerators further up the lagoon system, and also, if we have excess, to sell to the SEC. We also think that it's important because, of course, methane is a greenhouse gas, and so by burning it, we're destroying a greenhouse gas as well.
The pilot scheme at Werribee has resulted in around 10,000 cubic metres of gas per day being collected, with a methane content between 80 and 90%. The plan is now to cover another 3 treatment lagoons, but this time they'll be deeper, up to 8 metres. Other industrial and animal organic waste can be used to produce collectible methane, as is being demonstrated by this large-scale piggery near Ballarat in Victoria. Here, pig effluent is anaerobically processed in a very efficient 2-stage digester system. In the first digester, the waste is heated to the optimum 37 degrees Celsius and the gas extracted flows to a gas holder over the second digester. The liquid contents from the first digester are also pumped to the second cold container. This thermal shock causes the digested slurry to separate from the undigested material. Any undigested waste is returned to the heated first container, ensuring complete processing of the effluent by the microorganisms. The biogas collected contains about 70% methane and is used to fuel a series of small generating units called totems or total energy modules. These feature a small car engine and are designed to also co-generate heat, which is here used to warm the primary digester. There's also a large caterpillar generating unit, and the combined electrical output from these units both supplies the piggery's power requirements and enables excess electricity to be exported, or in other words, be sold to the state's power grid. But, as Scott Charles explains, using the pig waste to generate electrical energy is only part of the Berry Bank story.
You've got to sort of look at it not as just an electricity producing plant, but as something that sort of, one, it treats your waste, two, you've got your electricity sales, three, this organic fertiliser, which is a beautiful fertiliser, and sort of on our farm, for instance, we've never been able to crop before because the yields haven't warranted the work, and yet now we've been able to sort of crop all our land and sort of we're hoping to become self-sufficient in feed. I think when you look at our thickening plant, you can take it, we recycle all the water back through the piggery, which has meant 70% saving in the water we used, and that water that we're sort of using to clean the piggery with, we're also looking at a future project down the road of growing algae in that water, which will further purify the water, and we're looking to sort of market or have a look at markets that are selling this algae either as a health food or as a food for prawns. They're using it in aquaculture. And then you sort of say, already I've sort of mentioned the algae, electricity, fertiliser, the fact that you're treating waste. We've also got the potential to treat other people's waste in the system. We've also got the potential to utilise the carbon dioxide, which is being exhausted from the cogeneration units, pumping that into a greenhouse, using the fertiliser bed as a bed for the plants to grow and growing vegetables, and you're sort of looking at growing tomatoes in probably 3 weeks, which would normally take 7 in this sort of lovely tropical environment. So sort of everywhere you look, there's something else you can do. So you shouldn't just sort of limit yourself by thinking electricity is the only byproduct we get from this process, because there's a lot of other things that can develop.
While generating electricity for sale might have been only part of Berry Bank Pig Farm's operation, in the Melbourne suburb of Sunshine, it's the main focus of another methane gas collection project. This time, it's the use of gas produced by the decomposition of organic waste in the municipal tip. Here, the gas is called landfill gas, and it's produced by the natural rotting of material over a longer time span. The chemical process is the same, and the gas produced is a similar mixture of mainly methane and carbon dioxide. In Victoria, industry has been encouraged to export or sell electricity to the state grid in order to defer the construction of more large-scale, expensive power stations. The project at Sunshine is a joint venture by the local council and an international company which has expertise in electricity generation, GEC Althom.
In developing the facility, the council called for expressions of interest from various organisations to develop this on what's called a BOO basis, that's build, own, operate. We were the successful tenderer because we offered the most attractive conditions. In return for the right to develop this plant, which we have done primarily with our own money, we pay the council a small revenue for the gas that they supply, and in return, at the end of about 10 years, we will sell them this plant for a nominal sum of money, after which they will make quite a significant return on the power that's still generated from this plant into the future.
The process of extracting the gas is relatively simple. The landfill site has been capped with clay so that the gas produced is trapped, and plastic pipes have been sunk into the rotting garbage. Suction is applied with these pumps, and a volume of approximately 5,000 cubic metres of gas per hour can be obtained. Part of the normal operation of the plant is to monitor each of the 40 wells with a handheld gas analyser to determine the quantity and quality of the gas being produced.
In terms of quality, we're looking for a high methane content and a very low oxygen content. The methane content is the fuel that's used to power the station. Oxygen is detrimental. Firstly, it indicates that there could be a leak in the system, so we then need to go and look for that and correct that problem. The second is probably more important, because the process that generates methane is an anaerobic process which is killed by the presence of oxygen. So if we suck too hard on the wells and we pull oxygen in from the surface, in effect we will ultimately kill the field. So we need to monitor on a continuing basis what is happening out there in each particular well, and on a daily basis make corrections.
The gas extracted from the field is dried, compressed and then used as fuel for these 12-cylinder engines, each of which powers a generator. The power station is capable of producing a total of 7.7 megawatts of electricity, sufficient for approximately 10,000 homes. In contrast to the gas field, which employs relatively simple technology, the generating system is very much high-tech.
As the plant is designed to run continuously, there's a large proportion of the time that it's not attended by an operator, and the intention is that it should be able to control and protect itself. And the best way to do that is to automate it, and with the speed of modern computers and the compact size of the equipment involved, that's the only way to go in this sort of project. We have various computers which monitor and gather information from around the plant into a central location, process it for control purposes, and process it for monitoring purposes, which is then fed into a personal computer, which you can use for graphically displaying the parameters at any given instant, and over an historical nature, such as the graph which is being shown at the moment, which shows the exhaust temperatures from each of the cylinders on one engine. And if you look at the graph, you'll see that there's been variations in temperatures. Each cylinder, for example, has its own individual line, so you can monitor the history of that cylinder, and you can see when a cylinder has gone down in temperature, and that indicates a spark plug problem. And you would then take appropriate action to make that engine fully available.
At Sunshine, cogeneration is also part of the project, with the heat from the engines being used to warm nearby council greenhouses. The project at Sunshine is quite large by Australian standards, but it's also feasible to use the energy available from a much smaller landfill. Sam Bateman is a consultant with Maunsell Proprietary Limited, a company of consulting engineers and scientists. He's been responsible for many of the feasibility studies into landfill gas applications in Australia.
Well, small tips can be viable if there is a suitable customer nearby, and this would be some process that needs a fairly constant supply of heat. For instance, a brickworks or a pottery or possibly a greenhouse. And you can go down to the very smallest scale if you've got an end use which suits the amount of gas being produced by the site. You can go down to literally 100 cubic metres an hour of gas. And there are some successful projects that have been done that way. Usually it will take, on the smaller end of the scale, it will need a fairly entrepreneurial spirit by the developer, because he'll have to do a lot of it himself. They'll have to drill the wells and put the pipes in, because if he gets contractors or consultants to do that sort of thing, it will become far too expensive. So it needs somebody who's prepared to go hands-on and develop it. But if they do that, it's remarkable what you can achieve.
An example of a small project which uses the gas directly can be found on a farm in Yorkshire, England. Here, an old landfill tip on the property was causing a problem, with the escaping gas slowing crop growth on the surface. This was because the methane and carbon dioxide was displacing oxygen from the root zone of the plants. However, the same gas was recognised as a virtually free source of energy.
Well, it started about 12 years ago. There was an old sand quarry across in the field up there, which was filled in by the local council of just general household refuse. It was filled in, they covered the ground, made a top on the quarry, and then we tried growing arable crops, wheat and barley, which didn't really do too well. They grew, but we noticed patches dying off, and we didn't really know why at the time. So we had a guy who had experienced methane before. He did 1 or 2 little tests and says, well, you've got methane there, all right. So we did 1 or 2 tests, we put a stack up, and sure enough we had methane. That developed then what to do with the methane, so then we built the greenhouse. Not knowing anything about greenhouses because we're arable farmers, we went into a partnership with a chap that was a market gardener producing fuchsias and household plants, house plants, and did quite well out of it. But he eventually expanded on his own premises and didn't need the greenhouse any longer, so then left us with the problem of having a greenhouse with an abundance of heat, but we didn't know what to do with it. So we thought, well, what shall we ever go at now? So Mr. Williams, the owner, decided he would like growing fish. We'd heard that fish grew well in warm water, so that's what we did. We got a nice system going. We imported fish from Japan, fed them correctly, kept them in warm, constant temperature of 70 degrees, and they grew at a phenomenal rate.
A similar situation occurred near Adelaide in South Australia, when complaints were made to the Falzon family company about the smell coming from their brickworks. It was in fact found to be, once again, methane-rich gas from a nearby landfill.
Well, we got onto landfill gas more by chance. We were next to a landfill that was emitting landfill gas odours, and there was a primary school oval built on the landfill which couldn't grow the grass properly, so my father, being having a bit of vision, decided to investigate whether there was gas in that landfill that was usable for us to burn. And one thing led to another, and next thing I knew it, Dad had a pipe and we were burning gas in the kilns.
The fact that the gas source was so close to the brickworks meant that in a relatively short time the Falzons managed to dramatically reduce their expenditure for energy to heat the brick kilns.
In 1983 we experimented. By 1984 we'd cut our energy cost by 40% by the end of 1984, which in dollar terms was a saving of around $100,000 per annum.
Having developed expertise in the field of landfill gas, the family then sold the brickworks to start a new venture, the extraction of gas from Adelaide's largest landfill tip at Wingfield, the site of the proposed multifunction polis. Although electricity generation was the Falzons' preferred option for the use of the gas, the relatively low price for electricity offered by the South Australian Electricity Company meant that it was decided instead to sell the purified gas to the state gas utility. After researching techniques in the United Kingdom and the United States, the Falzons decided to use a membrane separation technique, which removes the carbon dioxide from the gas. Although the project was encouraged by the South Australian government, problems were encountered when the heating value of the landfill gas didn't quite come up to that of the state's natural gas. An initial solution to this problem was to add liquefied petroleum gas to raise the heat value. But this meant an increase in the cost to produce the gas. The gas company was able to find a better answer, which was to identify a group of nearby high-volume gas users who could use the landfill gas exclusively and pay an adjusted rate for the slightly lower energy content. But these difficulties may not have occurred in a different location.
A plant like what we have here would be more suited to, say, a town that doesn't have natural gas. Maybe a big country town where all of a sudden a plant like this could set up all of their natural gas needs.
Although the Falzons are extracting more than 10,000 cubic metres of gas from the Wingfield site, John is aware that this represents only a fraction of the gas being generated at the site, with the remaining methane still escaping to damage the atmosphere.
The energy's here, waiting to be used. The trouble we have with landfill gas is that we don't see it. If it was red in colour, we would be horrified.
All of the projects that we've looked at are on a relatively large scale. Even the greenhouse on the farm in Yorkshire represented spending of the order of $70,000 in 1985. By contrast, a student at Murrayville Secondary College in the far west of Victoria has made his own methane digester. It's part of the school's overall plan to demonstrate to the local community actions that can help care for the environment.
It was just an interest. I wanted to build a working model that pig and poultry farmers in the area could come and have a look at, so they could see how they can turn their waste products into replaceable energy.
This methane digester has a floating top which lifts as the gas is produced. Then a drum containing calcium hydroxide removes the carbon dioxide. Brendan has also made a filter containing steel wool to remove the odorous hydrogen sulfide. Initially, Brendan used mainly pig and chicken manure to fuel the digester, but then discovered, after referring to a study of the use of biogas generators in China, that using more vegetable matter improved the gas generation.
We found out that you have to have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 20:1, so that told us that we need much more plant material.
The plan with the digester is to use the gas to heat this mud brick building, housing baby chickens. The school project is quite a contrast to a multi-million-dollar power generation project, but both are examples of energy recovery using gas which would have otherwise escaped into the atmosphere, resulting in environmental damage. The range of projects examined here also demonstrates that, no matter what the scale, harnessing of methane, energy from waste, is a responsible and sensible approach to both the treatment of waste and the addressing of our energy needs for the future.